Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So good to see you all. As the summer break draws to a close and the new school year is just around the corner, there is a routine Hodson event that the children of my house are excited for, but I am not. Back to school clothes shopping. Now, this was fun when I was a kid. It was a pretty big deal back then. Going back to school shopping was the event. We would all go out to the mall. We only had one in my town. And I'd pick out some really new duds and some cool new shoes. And my mom would look at the price tag and tell me to put back the new duds and the new shoes that I had picked out. Or I'd pick out something that I thought looked really cool, but that my brother had just picked out for himself, so he'd put me in a headlock until I chose something else. I guess it really ruins your image to have your kid brother wearing the same shirt to school. So he'd threaten me, so you better not wear this or I'll slug you. Memories. But I get some new clothes, and I remember when I would try them on in the changing room at the store, while I was putting them on, I felt like I was wearing a superhero costume. Look at me, I have the power. And I'd get a new pair of sneakers, and if you didn't know this, in the kid universe, there is a special rule that after you unbox your new sneakers, you have a 24-hour window of time where those sneakers grant you the ability to run at top speed. So yeah, buying new clothes as a kid was a real big deal back in the day. I was also the youngest of three brothers, so most of my daily wardrobe was not purchased off the rack. Nay. Rather, Jonathan Hodson's new fall collection mainly consisted of things that my older brothers had grown out of that were kind of on its last leg and looked pretty ratty. If you look at pictures of my outfits growing up, I kind of look like the clearance rack at Goodwill, mixed in with some decent sneakers and a really bad 90s haircut. So fast forward to now, I don't like any part of buying new clothes for my kids. But in my defense, none of the other dads in the store look happy either. If you go to the mall around back to school shopping times, look at the families that are there. They all kind of look the same. They are primarily led by moms who have a shopping list, kids who are going absolutely berserk, and then sad dads at the back who are just in complete sticker shock of the whole situation. By the way, have you seen how much a pair of kids' pants is nowadays? It's about $8,000. And don't talk to me about shoes. They're like $26,000. And you can't just buy your kids shoes anymore. You have to buy them the ones with the little characters on them. They want the SpongeBob shoes or the Pokemon shoes, and those cost about $2 million. And the great thing about boys, especially my sons who are tall like me, they can only wear these clothes for about 43 seconds, and then they grow out of them completely, forever. And so 2 days later, you're back at the same store with the same mom and the same list and the same kids going berserk and the same sad dads. God bless us all. In order to work at a place that sells children's clothing nowadays, I think the only requirement to work there is that you cannot have a soul. You just have to be very sad. Maybe if I worked in a kids' shopping place, I'd be sad too. We were at the shoe store. I found my kid a pair of shoes, but it was in the wrong size. So I asked the clerk behind the counter, I said, hey man, do you have this in a size 6? And he just stood there in disbelief. He didn't say anything for 20 seconds, and he said, size 6 of what? And I thought, he's either on drugs or he has died and he's just still working there, just a corpse propped up behind the counter. Now I know what you're all thinking. You're thinking, Rabbi, this is 2026. You've just got to order all of their clothes online. Well, that is not foolproof either. There are still hiccups in this process as well. The first of which, sometimes they send you stuff that isn't even remotely in the same size that you ordered it. We bought a shirt for our 5-year-old on Amazon, and when it came in, the shirt was so big he could have used it as a parachute for skydiving. The other day, this is a true story, we ordered some pants for our kid, and when we took it out of the bag, it was obvious that it had already been worn and returned because a huge clump of hair fell out of the pocket. Ugh. Ugh. And while I was sitting there amongst the piles of new clothes, an assortment of shoes everywhere, the clump of hair on the floor, I thought to myself, wouldn't it be great if the clothes just grew along with my kids? Well, friends, believe it or not, that concept is right at the heart of this week's Torah portion, Parshat Ekev. In this Torah portion from the book of Deuteronomy, we get a very interesting idea in chapter 8, verse 4, that God says through Moses to the Jewish people. He says, quote, "Your clothing did not wear out, and your feet did not swell during these 40 years in the wilderness." Now, that's a fascinating concept, and it shows up elsewhere in the Torah too, actually later in the same book of Deuteronomy, this time chapter 29, verse 5, quote, "I have led you 40 years in the wilderness. Your clothes have not worn out on you, and your sandals have not worn out on your feet." Now, from a literary perspective, this solves a lot of problems, because obviously there was not a Target or a Kohl's in the middle of the desert while the Jewish people were wandering for 40 years. So that answers the question of how did people continue to wear fresh clothes for 4 decades? Well, God prevented their clothing from totally disintegrating into the desert heat. But just how this occurred has always been up for debate, especially for rabbis who feel like they need to drash out this concept. So let me share some ideas with you. One of my favorite explanations comes from Midrash Tanhuma. The rabbis imagine here that the clothing on the Israelites didn't just last, they in fact did grow along with the children. So every time a little Jewish boy had a growth spurt, his tunic had one too. Mazel tov. Can you imagine that? Sounds great. No frantic trip to the mall, no measuring of feet, no trying to convince your kid that last year's pants are supposed to stop above the ankles because that's the style now. The rabbis say their clothes just grew with them. I love that. Let's make that happen again. Let's all pray real hard. Now, in another part of the tradition found in Midrash Rabbi, the idea goes even further. The rabbis suggest that the clouds of glory acted kind of like a heavenly dry cleaner, and the Israelites' clothes were washed, pressed, and taken care of by God. Now, we're all modern people here. Some of you might hear these ideas and you might think, "Rabbi, that sounds a little silly." And maybe you're right. I mean, we can never really know. Maybe their clothes grew, maybe they didn't. Maybe the clouds of glory doubled as the world's first laundromat. Or maybe the rabbis are doing what rabbis do best, taking a simple verse and asking the question, what does this teach us about God? Because underneath all of those very colorful explanations is an idea that I think is anything but silly. God doesn't only take note of the dramatic moments in our lives, God also oftentimes takes care of the smaller details as well. Friends, I'm willing to bet that most of us here simply assume that some things will always kind of be there for us. We're lucky enough that most of us don't have to worry about things like food or water or a pair of shoes or a shirt on our backs. And I have to admit, as much as I complain about buying clothes for my kids, as much as I groan when I see the total at the checkout line, and it's offensive, guys, so terrible. The very fact that this is one of my biggest frustrations says something important about my life. It means my children are healthy enough to keep growing. It means that I have kids to shop for. It means, thankfully, I have the ability to provide for them. So what I call an inconvenience is actually evidence of an incredible blessing for me. Sometimes we all get so focused on things like the price tag that we forget to thank God for the child who's growing fast enough to need the next size. Sometimes we're so busy complaining about replacing the shoes that we forget to thank God for the little feet that have outgrown them. That's the message I hear in these verses. Not simply that God once performed a miracle in the wilderness, but that God has always been in the business of caring for God's people, even in the smallest and ordinary everyday details. The Israelites remembered the manna that fell from heaven, but Moses reminds them that there was another miracle happening every single day: their clothes, their sandals, the little things. The things they probably stopped noticing after a while. And maybe that's our challenge this week, everyone, to notice the blessings we've stopped noticing. To thank God not only for the spectacular miracles, but for the quiet ones. The ones hanging in our closets, sitting by our front doors, or in my case, scattered all over the living room after another back-to-school shopping trip. So as we begin another school year, may we learn to notice the quiet ways that God cares for us each and every day. And may we never mistake our blessings for burdens simply because we've grown used to them. And lastly, may all of our online orders arrive on time and in the right size, with everything we paid for and no extra hair in the pockets. Shabbat Shalom.